Recently, Naperville found itself at the center of a national story when 36-year-old resident Brian Howard destroyed communications at an FAA facility in Aurora. Naperville News 17's Alyssa Bohenick has more about the control center in our own backyard.
When Brian Howard sabotaged the Chicago Air Route Traffic Control Center on September 26th, many were surprised that the actions of just one could affect thousands. Flights were delayed nationwide for days. But why? The answer may surprise you in its level of complexity. Local resident David Sapadin, a retired FAA traffic controller who worked at the center, explains how airplanes are guided from sector to sector and the amount of data and communication that's needed.
If you can imagine a wedding cake, if you're at 17,000 feet or below and you're about 30 to 40 miles radius of O'Hare, then the responsibility for your flight is being handled out in Elgin. As soon as the aircraft wants to get out of 17,000 feet all the way up to the 40,000 feet and above, you're going to be switched to Chicago Center. And if you're going east, you'll be switched to a sector that handles east departures. If you're going south, you'll get switched to a sector that's handling south departures, and so on. So the flows of inbounds and outbounds are physically separated by low altitude sectors.
The Chicago sector handles 10 to 12,000 flights a day. The fire at the center put into motion a contingency plan Sapadin helped create when he worked at the FAA.
The contingency plan called for all of those terminal radar approach control facilities to vertically expand their airspace from whatever it was they normally worked, or 10,000 feet and below, to up to 23,000 feet. And that the aircraft would go from one to the other, to the other, to the other, until it got to C90 and could talk to O'Hare and then talk to the tower and get down. Okay, but this would obviously slow things down. The people at those facilities would be working airspace they're not used to. They would be working airspace at high altitude that they normally don't, at speeds that they're definitely not used to.
Though the contingency plan was in place, it wasn't practiced. Yet Sapadin feels the plan worked well, getting flights back into the air.
Once these people were deployed, then the numbers really went up. So some of this I'm sure they came up with on the fly. Whereas that's amazing. They didn't have any warning that this was coming. You know, it's tough. I hope I've communicated somehow the complexity of what's involved and the amount of data.
Though flights were operational, delays remained, even affecting the president days later when he had to reroute Air Force One to the Gary Airport instead of O'Hare as previously planned. Despite the troubles many flyers experience, Sapadin is relieved the disruption occurred during a less active flight time.
It might be a wake-up call. You know, it was a terrible thing. We were fortunate this happened actually on a midnight shift before all the controllers had reported to duty for the day shift, before the rushes had taken off from Midway and O'Hare. There were a few aircraft in the sky. This may, in some forms, be a blessing for FAA and the government and Congress to go through how they want to approach these issues down the road.
I'm Alyssa Bohenick for Naperville News 17.
The FAA hopes to restore full service at the Aurora facility by October 13th.